everybody. How did you get on with week 2? I will say that podcast, all the things that they talked about in that podcast was really instrumental in me getting to the point where I realised that there were a lot of things that I was doing spiritually. Well, I wouldn't say spiritually, I think just church connected. So sometimes activities that were through church or assignments, things that were to do that I realised, you know what, I had to get rid of some things, and things had to take priority over the top of some church assignments, some church activities. That is something you have to do by the Spirit, and it's nothing that I can tell you what to do with. But sometimes you have to say no, and focus on the fact that your testimony is based on becoming and not based on how much you're doing, if that makes sense. So that podcast really changed my view on how my prayers needed to be different, my worship needed to be different. And I find that Sunday is completely different for me now that I've got into the mindfulness practice, that I use Sundays as a time to kind of meditate at church. So this week, it's a focus on, I want you to understand why mindfulness works and how it works, but from a scientific point of view of what is happening in your brain. So I'm going to put a talk. It's from the app that I asked you to download last week, which is why I asked you to download it, because there are so many important things on there that we're going to go through. But this is from I think she's Danish or Dutch neuroscientist. She also is into well-being and mental health. And she talks about what happens in your brain. And we have many, many different networks in the brain. And one of these networks is called the default mode network. Okay. Now, what happens in your brain, if somebody asks you not to think of something, you can't help but think of that thing. So if the joke about don't think of a white polar bear, all you can think of is a white polar bear. And so sometimes when we're depressed, when we're anxious, we don't want to think of something, and we try to suppress those thoughts because those thoughts make us scared or upset or sad or angry. So we try to push them down in order not to feel them. And ironically, that makes us feel them and think about them more. The point of mindfulness is you have to allow those thoughts and those feelings to come. Now, I'm not talking about any major serious thoughts here like suicide, things like that. But every day, anxious, worries, thoughts, depressive thoughts, you have to a degree, allow them and accept them. So it's kind of like, yep, that thought is there right now. I hear you, I see you, I know that you're there. But what you don't have to do is engage with that thought. So, the minute that you engage with that thought and feed it and worry over it more, you are giving that thought power. So the first part of the process of we're not going to call it controlling thoughts, because that's not the point. You can't control your thoughts. What we can do there is allow them, accept them, and not make them as powerful. So the first part, with the default mode network, this is basically what they call in yoga and other things the monkey mind, where your mind is all over the place. It's where daydreaming happens. Let's say you're sat at church and you're in the sacrament, but all you can think of is, I have to do this and I have to do this, and my shopping, and I have to do this for the kids, and I have to go to this meeting, and I have this at work. When your mind wanders and daydreams, that is called the default mode network. Now, when you're anxious or depressed, that default mode network takes over more and has more and more power. And it can go to the past, to the future. It just goes all over the place. And so the first thing to kind of do when you have the monkey mind comes is to kind of say, oh, my mind's thinking of that right now. This is where this thought is. That's okay. So whenever we try to concentrate, this default mode network, the monkey mind, takes over. It tries to take over. It's like, hey, you want to concentrate right now? You've got something to do, a homework assignment, whatever. Default mode network pops in. Now, for people with ADHD, adults have it too, children, a typical brain, once the direct mode network pops in, there are ways to suppress that. In a brain that has ADHD, those ways don't work the same. So, okay, back to first network, all over the place. Second network we call the direct experience network. I think they call it something else in England, the TMN or something. But what this means is the direct experience network and the direct mode network cannot simultaneously happen. A bit like they say, fear and faith cannot be experienced at the same time in the same person. So if you want to quiet this down, turn down the volume on your monkey mind, turn down the volume on your anxious thoughts, your depressive thoughts, the way to do that is to try and plug into your direct experience network and this part of the mind. Now, this isn't about distraction. Distraction from bad thoughts, negative thoughts, worrying thoughts does not work. Distraction is where, kind of like if you ever go to say, okay, I want to spend time with my friend and perhaps I won't feel so bad. But when you're with your friend, you're still thinking about those anxious or depressive thoughts. And I've done that many a time. And you're worried about going home when the distraction ends and you feel them all again. Because in that situation, you're trying to push down those thoughts and all you're substituting them with is distraction. So if your thoughts are going crazy, the best way to turn them down is to have a direct experience which involves engaging your brain and engaging your senses. This has to involve one or more of your senses. If you want to be engaged in something, you have to engage your senses. So smell, touch, taste, vision, what was the last one? Audio, hearing, okay? So if you think about something that you really enjoy doing, now I love art. When my anxiety was super bad, I love pencil drawings, and I have to focus so much when I draw that I'm using my brain power, but I was also using my hands at the same time. So I was engaging that sense with my brain, which helped me not think about those thoughts. They weren't the predominant or powerful thoughts that they were when I wasn't engaging in anything. Another way is knitting. I find that when I'm knitting, or if you like crocheting, I have to concentrate here, and I'm also using my hands at the same time. Reading a book doesn't work for me. If I'm sat reading a book, all I'm using is vision, and I can read a book at the same time as think of all the anxious thoughts I have. Doesn't work. So the more anxious you are, the more depressed you are, you need to engage more senses. So something that uses perhaps taste and hearing and touch at the same time would be perfect for someone who is over anxious. So it has to involve brain power, concentration, and one or more of the senses in order to turn the volume down on your monkey mind. So remember that, okay? So this is what this lady talks about in the talk that I'm going to give you a link to. And I want you to really study that and understand what she's talking about, because this is the whole principle of mindfulness. Your mind wanders. That's normal. But we can bring things back to concentration and engage our senses to the point where that worrying voice, that anxious or depressed voice, doesn't have power over you anymore. It takes practice, a lot of practice, but you can absolutely get there. So I'm going to put that link on there. Really go through her talk multiple times if you need to. And then I'm also going to put a link onto a YouTube video that is a short meditation that involves the senses. And it can be also used for things like panic attacks or talk down from if you're in a very highly emotional state, where you have to focus on so many things you can see, so many you can smell, touch, taste, or hear. And that's a really good way to bring you back to out of your mind and back to the present and back to reality. So hopefully you will enjoy that and understand that Heavenly Father has created our brains with so much power to be able to tune them into things that are real, to quiet down the panic and the worry and the thoughts that aren't real, and the thoughts about what if this and what if that. We have the power to overcome that. We absolutely do. And I know because I've done that, but it takes dedication and you have to stick with it. So what I talked about before, if any of you do struggle with ADHD, it's absolutely possible. I am completely prone to ADHD in my brain. It's all over the place. Always wanting to be busy, things like that. But it is possible. It just means that generally your brain with the monkey mind, the default mode network and the direct experience network, your brain doesn't typically cancel out the other like a typical brain would. And so it takes more practice. It takes more dedication. I would say probably more senses. But a lot of children, especially, that they have practiced mindfulness with, their ADHD symptoms have really come down, where they may be kind of all over the place, but once they need to sit down and do an assignment, or they need to listen to you or anything else, they tune into that mindfulness principle and they are there, they are present, and they can learn to focus on that one thing. So hopefully you gain a lot from that. And then from here on, we'll go on with mindfulness meditations to help us with that. I hope you have a great week exploring how your brain works, and just keep, every day will just be a practice of, if you find these thoughts popping up, your mind is wandering, your mind is daydreaming, find an experience that you can engage in that involves one or more sense and your concentration, and you can help turn the volume down on those thoughts that you find don't serve you. Okay? Hope you have a great week. Bye.